Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name's Joshua. I'm the founder and director of El Terreno Cultural Exchange Center here in the Ecuadorian Andes. Today, we've got another very exciting presentation for you from one of our interns, Elise Nam, who's been here for just 5 weeks. But she has been dedicating herself to a really important and innovative project here in the region, exploring the possibilities of developing a social enterprise which can have both community and environmental impact, and making sure it's not only something that has that impact and can make a difference, but something that's profitable and therefore can help to generate resources to make even more impact and ensure sustainability over the long term. Um, I won't spoil it anymore. I'm sure she will share everything, but very exciting to have you here, Elise, and to share the work that you've been doing. So over to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, yeah, as Joshua said, I've been working on helping to develop a social enterprise in conjunction with the foundation that also has a environmental and social impact around the region. Specifically, we are in Atandawa, and I think there's about 11 communities around about, yeah, this area. Um, And so, yeah, trying to find a way to do that. And we had a workshop last month where we invited a bunch of community leaders to come and talk about the different opportunities, expertise, different ideas for brainstorming for social enterprise in the area. And we came out of that with a lot of different ideas. And so my task over that couple weeks following that workshop was to figure out which one of those would be a viable option, which one would um, have a greater impact on the community and a positive impact on the environment. And that is how I came across the chocho, which is a lupini bean. It's often in here in Ecuador, as well as in Europe in like pickled form, but it's not a super popular bean, and it's yet until yeah. So we will present sort of the research that I've been doing on the chocho and the industry, as well as the different models and um sort of projections for what this enterprise might look like. So, just a brief about us page. As Joshua said, we are El Terreno, which is a cultural exchange center which accepts global volunteers, interns, and associates. And the main mission is to limit migration so that migration is a choice, not a necessity. And for this reason, they wanted to have a broader impact and have begun the process with my internship of brainstorming a social enterprise that can both help support the administrative costs of the foundation as well as realize the mission. And the mission of the Chocho would be to empower Andean farmers and process and commercialize the chocho bean, to reintroduce it as a regenerative high protein crop and to ethically supply to global markets. And the vision is to become the leading fair trade supplier of Andean lupini beans, which are called chochos, while supporting indigenous communities, environmental restoration, and health forward food innovation. So in the executive summary of what I'm going to be going through, basically through this presentation, is with the product of the enterprise, which is that Chocho Chileno is a raw and or processed supplier of the Andean lupini bean, offering high protein, low carb, regenerative ingredients to B2B and B2C buyers, as well as fair trade ingredients, the Chocho bean. The leadership, so the venture will be led by the El Terreno Foundation, based in Atandawa, Ecuador, and supported by local community leaders and partnering with farmer associations. The overall industry, which is the global plant-based industry, is growing rapidly with both demand shifting toward soy-free, allergen, conscious alternatives like chocho. And lupine beans are nutritionally dense. They have all nine essential amino acids. They're agroecologically resilient, positioning Terreno well for global impact. The competitive advantage would be that, unlike competitors, Chocho Terreno operates directly in communities, employs a social enterprise model, and emphasizes traceability, regenerative agriculture, and fair trade pricing. The financial status would be that the initial operations require modest capital investments in processing infrastructure and staff mostly, as well as transportation costs and multiple business models. I'll explore multiple business models in this presentation to sort of get a better understanding of what it might look like to process the chocho, whether that's through a collection center or by renting out different machines in order to process and dealkalize the chocho. And yeah, but the future outlook would be to hopefully launch a small pilot project by 2026 and have a commercial product by then, as well as the long-term development goal of either just expanding supply, expanding commercialization, or having our very own factory as well as our own products. So the business product is that the mission is to provide raw or processed high quality and fair trade chochos to B2B or B2C customers in the Ecuadorian and international market, while emphasizing profit sharing, whether that's through fair market prices or a potential profit sharing model in the future, to communities and environmental sustainability. And historically, chochos were actually a staple crop in the Andes. However, after colonization, chochos were replaced with fava beans, which are also called habas, and other staple crops. But chochos are a naturally regenerative crop with the power to fix over about 400 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare, produce green manure, and aerate the soil. And so for the fair trade portion, we'll guarantee fair market rates and share social metrics. And through that, I've done a small cost analysis of what it looks like for a farmer to from production to harvest, and then to selling the product to make sure that the people that are involved in that process also will be able to make sure that they have a fair market rate. And then in terms of sustainability, they will try to mandate different, perhaps native tree and plant reforestation, as well as crop rotation as the main priority, as well as organic practices. So just a basic outline for people who don't, for understanding the kind of timeline of from planting the chocho to the harvest. The planting usually occurs here between January and February after the first rains. However, there is a variety that I'll be talking about a little bit later. That is the industry variety that apparently can be planted in March, and harvested around October. But given that this hasn't we are not sure what's been tested in the region. The mix is January and February. The growth, typically the chochos stop growing around August, and then the drying process takes about 2 months for them to dry on the vine, and then they're harvested around November. A couple of the key resources. So we have human resources, which are farmers, processing employees, administrative employees, agricultural technicians, and the associations. We have natural resources, which are fertile land, water, seeds, organic compost, hopefully coming from animals or sort of kitchen compost. And then tree seedlings if we are wanting to pursue the path of reforestation project in tandem with the chochos. In terms of infrastructure, we're going to need a collection center, a dealkalization plant if we decide that that's the route to go, but that obviously won't be for a couple of years. We'll need transportation as well as machinery. In terms of digital, there's not too much other than bookkeeping and potentially a mapping software if we want to have sort of a transparency metric, or for the future if we are pursuing an ecotourism path with the Chochos, it might be interesting to have a map with the different associations and the different farmers and things like that. And then economic, which would be nonprofits, NGOs, INEAP, or MAG, which is the Ministerio de Agricultura y Ganadería. So Ministry of Agriculture and Milk, cows. Um, and uh, also similar cooperatives and suppliers. So quick market analysis. The plant-based protein market is around 21.8 billion in 2024, and it's projected to reach about 36.17 billion by 2030. And the plant-based market is roughly projected to reach about 85 billion by 2030. In terms of the lupini bean industry, the rise in products made from alternative proteins demand a great and create a great entry point to create a supply chain for the lupini bean. Lupini bean, like their soy counterparts, as I mentioned, have all nine essential amino acids and a protein content of 40%, making them the legume with the highest protein content per gram in the world. They're also low in carbs, playing into the keto market which is a low carbohydrate and high fat diet. And so the lupini bean industry was about 34.4 billion. And this is because most of the lupini beans are actually not grown for human consumption. So only 4% are grown for human consumption, and the rest is for animal feed. And then at a CAGR of 3.3%, so projected to reach about 46.3 billion by 2030. And this is the breakdown of where beans are grown by country. So the majority of lupini beans are grown in Australia, which is actually a different variety than the kind that's grown here in Ecuador. And then the second highest percent would be in Europe. And then Africa is about 4%, and the light blue is South America. So in terms of the opportunity, like I mentioned, it's very similar to soy in terms of the properties. It's got wide uses, which are feed, oil, and plant proteins. But the problem with soybeans is that they have significant environmental impacts, such as deforestation, excessive use of pesticides and fertilizers due to monocropping and GMOs. There's also the threat of increased intensity in weather extremes caused by climate change. Argentina's farming belt is being hit actually with 3 to 4 times normal levels of flooding, which may have serious impacts on soybean harvests. Soy is also one of the big eight allergens, which account for 90% of food allergens in the world. So those are kind of the issues with soybean, which kind of helps it position the lupini bean as a really great alternative to a soybean. And the lupini bean actually has a higher protein content. And then in terms of alternative products, so there's a couple on the market, just to name a few. Just Egg is one of them, which is a vegan pourable egg substitute. So you can pour it and scramble it just like a normal egg, and it's made by mung bean protein. But due to the avian flu earlier this year in 2025, egg prices went through the roof, and as a result, Just Egg saw sales about 5 times higher than this time last year, despite a majority of its customers being omnivores, and the increased prevalence of zoonotic diseases might cause a higher drive towards plant-based alternatives. Other products which have also gained popularity are alternative soy food tofu, such as Foodie's vegan pump food, which is made from pumpkin seeds, and fava bean protein isolate tofu, which is made by Big Mountain Foods. Couple of the key drivers for the market acceleration. So the growth drivers would be health and sustainability trends, nutritional profile, and agricultural advantages for the lupini bean. And the key applications would be food industry, animal feed, and nutraceuticals. A few of the challenges presented for the chochos in this region would be the first sort of key pieces, quantity and quality. So currently in this region, a lot of the farmers tend to mix the different seeds while processing, but the industry and commercialization of chocho beans requires the INEAP 450 variety. And so we would need to make sure that there is no way that these seeds could get mixed, because the issue is that if they get mixed and they get sent to a commercial plant, that and then the brand decides to produce it, and they have issues with the product because it's too bitter, because there was mixing of native varieties, or a variety that's called vaquita, which is like a cow, so it's got little spots on it, and it's hard to tell whether that's a bean that's gone bad, or whether it's that variety as well. And so it's really important and will be really key to make sure that we provide the education as well as the certified seed, in order to make sure that we have a standard quality. The initial investment is a hurdle that, yeah, I'll talk about a little bit later on, because or 2 days ago, we had one of the potential partners that we have been in touch with come, and the CEO came, and she was talking about sort of different ways to implement this project, and I had to change a couple things around, and as a result of that, definitely changed up the finances of things. So the initial investment would probably need El Terreno to find a way to either seek outside investment, or if the internship program grows, or if there are associates who are able to take up roles in the initial process of getting this off the ground. Um, that would be a great way to help curb that investment. To be organic, we, again, in line with the values of wanting to be organic, of wanting to help the environment and to be sustainable, we would want to be organic. And as a result, a few of the farmers around this region do use organic practices, but a lot of them still use chemicals and insecticides. And so it's going to take time and education to do a proper organic process, and to bring in agricultural technicians and maybe do a soil sample. And so that's just a hurdle, as well. But also, we have the possibility that the company that we have been in touch with might want to help do a pilot program or a research program. So there might be ways to make it a bit more accessible. And then the last challenge, just being a sort of a general market challenge, maybe not so pertinent to us, but pertinent to our customers, would be that there's been a lot of growth in the plant-based space, but in the past year, it's contracted a little bit, and that's just because life is getting a little bit more expensive, and with elevated inflation and tight consumer budgets, people are choosing the cheaper option, and often that's not the plant-based option. In terms of competitive analysis, there's a couple of different players in the space. Again, most of the peony beans are grown in Australia, and so there's been some innovation there. There's been some innovation in Europe, as well as a brand that operates out of Peru, but I believe is a German brand called Tarwi. Um, and they have a quite a significant control of the supply, I think, in Peru. But in terms of the supplying, um, it's actually the market's quite fragmented. And so, because of that, it sort of positions us really well, to include the sweet variety, which again is not normally grown in Europe or in Australia. And Chocho Terreno will provide a one-stop Chocho-focused supply to companies seeking lupini beans with environmental and sustainability transparency. Also, these competitors, some of them are not even competitors. A lot of them work with the lupini bean, but I wasn't able to figure out where they're sourcing them from, so they could also be potential partners. So, in terms of speaking of partners, we've had two conversations with prominent and national and international brands who are interested in purchasing chochos. And for one of the companies, they need the chocho to be processed, which means it needs to be dealkalized, because chochos have alkaloids in them, and they need to be sorted. And for the other brand, they seek the raw product, which makes it relatively easy, but there are some caveats involved in terms of the financial side, which we'll get to later. Both have factories here in Ecuador, which means that we don't need to figure out how to do the exportation process. It makes it quite simple in terms of finding the commercialization and securing a customer. And both prioritize the use of Ecuadorian source chochos, which is really important because there is a fear and a worry that the chochos from Peru, for example, they come in at a lower price, which then makes the market here, the price here lower. And so by ensuring that we work with companies who are either really focused on the fair trade aspect or the sustainability aspect, or that are focused on using Ecuadorian chochos, we kind of hedge against that issue. And yeah, so the founder from one of the brands, like I mentioned, visited on May 28th, May 29th to speak with various farmer associations and scope out potential factory and provide some guidance as to what they think that our next steps might be. So as far as business models go, we have sort of three different business models that could work. The first one actually probably being the most financially difficult just because the raw chochos, so even if we were to process them, which would mean um, sorting them, making sure that we get rid of any impurities, and then classifying them, even if we were to do that, we can only sell it at a certain premium for the raw quality. However, if we were to use the um, Model 2 and Model 3, where we are using a maquila to dealkalize the chochos, which a maquila is like a manufacturer, it's like a tariff-free manufacturer in Latin American countries that you can rent out the equipment and use their equipment for certain prices. And by doing that, our margins go up quite substantially just because you can charge a much higher premium for a processed, dealkalized, sorted chocho. So after speaking with the founders yesterday, it sort of changed again a lot of the project. And so yeah, again, this is all still in the research process as well as the very, very beginning stages. So there's bound to be different things that change throughout the process. And the first one being that we would really need a pilot program and we'd want to start small. So we visited one of the farmers associations called Unidos Somos Más in Bramadero Chico, which they have about 12 active members and 10 hectares of land. So if we are going to do crop rotation, we would only have actually 5 hectares of available land. And we would run a pilot project with them because they have the infrastructure in place in terms of the legalities, um, in terms of yeah, being able to work with them and do it in a small scale, in an organized manner. And some of them also have experience with organic growing as well. Then from year 2 to 5-ish, we have the collection center option, which um, would be to open a collection center most likely in Atandawa, to have a couple of different machines which help to sort, to classify, to basically process the raw chocho. And through these years, I've also projected in the model that we're increasing the program each year by about 200% until year 5, where we reach about 320 hectares in this region. To grow chochos on, making sure that we are still employing the same crop rotation method as well. And then the last stage, which is 5 and onwards, which years 5 and onwards, would be to continue expanding the program by finding customers, potentially expanding the area. We have about there's in the appendix, I've put a map of the space around us. There's about 2,800 hectares, and so it's possible we can expand the amount of chochos grown. It just again depends on the programs, depends on the market and things like that, and the demand, of course. And then in that, we also have the potential investment in factory as well as agritourism as a possibility or carbon credits as well. And then briefly just touching on the financial models, the farmer premium, which is just to make sure that we're paying a certain fair market price towards to the farmers, is model 1. And then the second one be perhaps down the line, we will do profit sharing with associations or in order to sort of make them stakeholders of the business and ha have them be a little bit more invested in the success of the enterprise. Okay. From a financial assumption side, so given the there's very little research as well as available information online about the different costs of the Chocho, the inputs, and all of these things. So I had a couple of conversations with one of the neighbors who has had a lot of experience with growing Chochos, as well as yesterday we visited the associations. They helped to verify some of the prices, and then of course finding what I can off of the internet for the different metrics used in the assumptions. So like I said, I have about a land ramp of about 200%. So that's the amount of land that we are increasing by from the pilot, which the pilot starts at 5 hectares to 320 hectares by year 5, and then held constant for years 5 through 10. Um, the yields per hectare, the average yield is typically about 1,500 kilograms, which is an estimated amount. Of course, some years are better, some years are worse. That's farming. And number is confirmed by the neighbor as well, Luis Guerrero, and also confirmed by INEAP. It's on INEAP has a technical page on the INEAP 450 variety. And so there's a lot of information about the planting, the process, the different sort of scientific things that go into it. It was really helpful. From a raw selling price, or the price paid to farmers would be about 1.1 USD per kilogram. Currently, I think the price is around 100, but it ranges anywhere between 90 to 130. But then there's also the issue with intermediaries coming to regions and charging half of that. So it's a bit varied. But the selling price can go up to about 1.3. And then the selling price process can be $2, which is actually, I think, a bit more conservative. And of course, these are taking into account that we're charging a premium because we're ensuring that there is fair trade, and that it abides by the B Corp and as well as the company's rules for fair trade. Just a quick note on the cost for each of the farmers. So again, after having a conversation with Luis, the seed cost it's about $1 per pound, and you're about 50 pounds per hectare roughly. So in total, it's about $50 for the seed. Oh, that number seems to have gotten messed up. But for the extra labor cost, so it's about $525. Um, because often what happens is they will employ other people during the harvesting time, which means that they pay them anywhere between $10 to $15 a day. And so if we're assuming a fair trade price of at least $15 a day for 7 days, which takes about a week to get the harvest done, and 5 employees is about $525. And then the other inputs would be compost, organic fertilizers, around $30. I mean, the Chocho it's very resilient. It doesn't really require too much work. Of course, in the first years, while getting the organic process off the ground, it might require a bit more. But again, by doing it organically, you're de significantly decreasing the costs of the other inputs. Okay. More assumptions. In terms of selling general administrative costs, so we would need a bookkeeper, we'd need a coordinator, processing employees and factory employees. So processing and factory, that factory is only, that number is only used when we have the factory option, is in about year 5. And then processing employees, the harvest season happens, and then there's likely going to be a short period of intensive work where all the chochos get processed. So it's about reasonable. In terms of capital expenditures, so if we were to invest in a factory, it'd be minimum $40,000, probably, yeah, which is a one-time CapEx cost. And doing this depends when we do it and how we do it. It might require Altenenos to seek funding, but if we're doing it in year five, it also has the potential to be covered by our own profit. Um, Collection center costs, if we assume we pay about $200 a month to the community in Atandawa. Collection center investments, about $12,000 for all of the different machines and equipment that we might need. Factory rent, around $400 for the factory. Collection center maintenance, around 3,000. Factory maintenance, around 5,000. And then the transport costs are something that I'm really not 100% sure on. This number is also off. Um, yeah, I'm not 100% sure what the transport cost would be and what it would look like and whether it makes more sense for us to have our own truck. And um, I just didn't have enough time to figure that all out. But these are the costs that I kind of pulled from the internet to figure out what it might be, what the potential transport costs, because we would have to transport around like different communities, and then also from Atandawa to Quito. And then if we were to work with Maquila, we would need the transport there. And so I've also put a premium on the Maquila transport because assuming that it may take us out of the way and then have to go back to Quito, so it's about two times the accounting for the extra costs. Okay, a couple more assumptions. Discount rate of 10%. Profit sharing, zero currently because that's not the model we would probably start with. Uh, I've only forecasted for 10 years. We have a cost growth rate of about 3%, so that accounts for inflationary costs. Depreciation, about 8%. Tax rate, 18% here in Ecuador. And then the weighted average cost of capital, which is about 15%. And it's a pretty moderate discount rate for the riskier enterprises in emerging markets. So a fair should produce a relatively fair value. Okay, so model one would be to have a collection center and then to have a factory by year five. Um, I'm not going to run through all of this. I also, again, like I said, with the visit yesterday, it caused me to move around a lot of different assumptions. And there's a lot of different things that wasn't able to take into account, or perhaps I'm underestimating, overestimating. It's just, again, the issue with like, we would really need, and this is one of my recommendations, is we really need to have clearer costs and a clearer understanding of everything in order to really get the big broader picture. And then as you see here with this model, so the model being that we only have the collection factory and we're only um, until year five, and we're only in those first 4 to 5 years, we're only producing raw chochos. We can't charge much more of a premium than the 1.3 on the raw chochos, so it means that our profit is negative. But it does mean that the whole enterprise as a whole has a net present value of about 232,000, 232,500 dollars. So it's still it still is profitable, but it requires a significant amount of risk and uh investment upfront, which is challenging. So the second option actually looks quite good. And I think this option and then the third option, which is to use the maquila because they're able to to make the dealcoholized chocho, and then we take it back and we send it out to the companies. And by doing that, again, like I said, we are able to charge a much higher premium on it. So in the first 2 years, 3 years, sorry, we're pretty much negative, but then by year three, um, we're in the positive, and then it grows pretty exponentially after that. Because if we introduce a factory, we're paying less transport costs. We're not paying the maquila anymore. We're using our factory, and we're yeah. So it's got about a net present value. And again, like I said, these numbers probably not the most accurate. It really needs to be um yeah, everything needs to be verified. Uh, a little bit more in depth, but about 445,000 as sort of the total value of the business. And similarly, with only using the Maquila only, again, there's issues with not knowing the exact costs and the different sort of, I've only had 5 weeks to work on the project and really 2 to 3 weeks to hone in on um, all the different aspects that go into the project, but about the same. The maquila actually looks quite good, and it also means that for us, if we decided we didn't want to invest in the factory, the the amount that we make is still quite significant, as well as it goes back into the community. Um, so it's definitely an option to consider. So in terms of next steps and recommendations, my recommendations would be if you can find an intern, which Joshua said there might be one that's interested in coming, or an associate who could do research on soils, on the on organic farming, as well as on environmental and health factors, just because it helps to lower the costs of the technical support that we might need. It doesn't necessarily get rid of them, but it will definitely help, and also helps us to get a little bit better of a picture of things. Also, just research from the financial side and funding as well. Yeah, so that's my next one is just search for available funding. If any app or MAG or any NGOs that might be interested in a project like this, or it could be a mutually beneficial thing where we're working with any app and they get to do the research while they provide us with seed. Um, that's an option. Again, we need clear costs and pricing, a much better financial model, and then maybe figure out other ways that are possible to sort of bootstrap the initial costs. And that could be through community investment as well. And the last thing being, we just need technical assistance. With the final meeting presentation yesterday, that was one of the things that a few of the community members really stressed was just having technical assistance in order to make sure that there was enough guidance and enough support in the community to be able to do a project like this, to be able to ensure quality, to be able to ensure organic farming, and to give the confidence to the community in that regard. So, yeah, thank you for joining. At Chocho Terreno, we're not just growing a crop, we're regenerating land, revitalizing Andean food systems, and restoring opportunities to indigenous communities. With the growing global demand for ethical, climate resilient proteins, the time for Chocho is now.
Fantastic. Congratulations. The time for Chocho is now. I
It's
like
now.
that. It's going to stick with us, I think. Great. Fantastic for really comprehensive presentation, Elise. I really appreciate that. So we're going to open up for a few questions now. So if you've got one at the ready, you can raise your hand. In the meantime, I'd like to ask a couple of things myself. So first of all, you mentioned the fact um, that we did the community meeting at the beginning to get their input and their perspective on things. We had people who were suggesting tourism. We obviously had loads of different potential suggestions in terms of agricultural products. How
Mhm.
did you focus in and decide that Chocho's was the best project to work on?
Yeah, I mean, you and I both worked on developing out a couple of the business model canvases to sort of get a better understanding of the different players involved. We also spoke with a couple of people as well as I did a couple of community visits. So just looking at the cooperative model in Salinas, for example, and going to different projects similar to that, or speaking with different organizations that work with projects that are similar to this. And then also just sort of thinking it through. For example, tourism is one of them. How can we bring tourism to an area where there's not as much of a reason for people to come and do tourism here when that the expertise isn't necessarily developed out? How are we able to do that? And one of the ways that we kind of came up with that is, well, if there's a reason for somebody, like for example in Salinas, there's the reason to go and see Salinas. I mean, it's beautiful, but is the cooperative model, and people are really interested in that, and so they have tours based off of that. From that, other cooperatives have grown that have come out of that, and you get to see the different the cheese process and everything that's involved with that. So sort of thinking of the different the also the potential for growth um, with each of the businesses as well.
Great, thank you. And you also mentioned like the risk or the effects of having grown soybeans in Argentina, the monocropping and the use of chemical fertilizers damaging the land. Why are chochos any different?
Um, well, firstly, one of our main values is environmental sustainability, so I think having that at the forefront is really important. The second thing, like I mentioned, is chochos are really, really great for the soil. They fix a lot of nitrogen. They're very resilient from both the drought perspective, can grow in high altitude. And as we've seen a lot of deforestation in the uh, around this area, um, yeah, the chocho is a really great way to help sustain and to um, get to help sequester carbon, to help aerate the soil. And then the last one being it's great in terms of rotational crops. So that being sort of the forefront of rotating the crop to different areas. So we're making sure we're not planting on the same plot each time to allow the soil and the other plants to take advantage of the nitrogen that's been fixed and to help it air out a different space. So from just like a whole crop perspective, it in and of itself is a regenerative crop.
Thank you very much. Christian has a question.
Hi.
Hi.
Good presentation. I have one doubt is what do you think is the most difficult challenge to try to implement the whole project if you have the, the maybe the budget or the facility to implement? What do you think is the strongest, the most difficult? Can be cultural, can be social, maybe probably about technology or politics
If we have all of the,
and
if
the
we had the
resources.
money to do it, the resources, I think most likely the educational piece, probably. Again, we really need to make sure that the chocho industry pretty much demands one variety, and so making sure that we have that um, a standard, the education for people to understand the standard, the processing quality, all those different things are probably the greatest thing involved. In addition to that, the initial support and guidance to help with the organic farming. Because in the first year, the production might drop. It sort of makes people think, oh, well, maybe this isn't as good of a pathway or yeah, we should go back to using chemicals. But in reality, it's more first year it has the potential to be on par with chemical with conventional agricultural practices. Also, one of the things that one of the community members was mentioning yesterday is even with the use of conventional agriculture, he lost all of his crops. So I think also getting people back on board with the idea and just providing that education around it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, final one for me then, more on a personal note. Um, you jumped straight into the project. It'd be really great to hear a little bit about yourself, your story, why you decided to come here, and helped develop you both personally and professionally?
Yeah, for sure. Um, so I received a fellowship last year to go travel, and I was able to come up with a proposal of my choosing. And so I chose the themes of permaculture, sustainability, and indigenous cultures. And ironically, before this, before I had done internships in finance and investment banking and in asset management. And after going away to Australia in my third year of college, I did a sustainability program and got to live in an eco village and just get to know a lot more in terms of the sustainability space and got really involved in that. And so I kind of cast off my financial hat, so to speak. And then throughout this year, I've had the opportunity to travel to different projects and volunteer at different projects or work on different internships, for example, like this one at El Terreno. And yeah, slowly started to realize, what were the problem. I was really interested in sort of, obviously the work that I was doing and working with the land, but also what were the problems with the NGOs? What were the issues that they were facing? How could these things be fixed? And one of the things that I came across was through social entrepreneurship. And so I kind of put half my finance cap back on and got really interested in how we can use business and in a sustainable way because we do operate in a capitalistic system. And yeah, I was thankfully really
Oh no, we've lost her. Oh yeah, you're
okay.
back.
I'm back. To stumble upon El Terreno. And I had a conversation with Joshua and got to, yeah, explain my interests a bit better. And he said that there was this opportunity to help develop the social enterprise, which for me was really exciting. And because I've never done something like this before. And I find it really fascinating, really interesting, getting to combine all of my different passions into one. And so, yeah, my experience here has been absolutely amazing, and it's been really, yeah, it's been felt really special because I definitely felt like here I got to interact the most with communities than I have at any of the other projects, and that's been really special and really a really key piece to developing the project as well.
Great. And one final question. You've left us with as many questions as answers, which is totally understandable with the amount of time that you had. Uh, if anyone was to continue coming, um, what, I mean, you got both the kind of agricultural technical side and then you got the commercial side. What sort of skills would it be best for them to have coming into an internship like this to continue with it? And what could they get out of it as a result?
I think from the agricultural, more ecological side of things, um, there, for example, the founders that came from the company, they said that INEAP has done pretty much no studies in Bolivar as far as the Chocho, first of all, Chocho research is extremely limited, but as far as organic farming and sort of other different modes there, so getting to do research on the soil and really see perhaps even like get to monitor the change year to year of what planting a crop like this looks like and how this can be replicable in other places. I think that would be really interesting to see. And something, yeah, that you would be able to get out of it is you get to be the first person to do it. You get to see the whole process. You get to be really, really hands-on involved in starting the pilot program, in working with farmers and associations. And then from the sort of more finance, business, commercialization side, again, you get to be part of of evolving and developing a business from the ground up, quite literally. And that is a really great experience. You get to speak with, for example, I mean, different people and different founders and meet really, really interesting people and push out yourself out of your comfort zone. But I think it puts you in a really great position to be really entrepreneurial and innovative and think through different problems and um, yeah, get to also interact with community, which is great as well. And have mentorship through El Terreno as well, which has been really helpful throughout this whole process.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing all of that. Really informative, concise presentation. Thank you for all of your hard work and effort that you've put over the last few weeks. I've got a good feeling about this, you know. Obviously, in this we've got an extra level of personal investment, let's say, because there's a level of risk and involvement that us as a foundation that we'll be taking on. Um, but I think that the place you've got it to, I can see the potential, and things are a lot clearer than where they were just a few weeks ago in terms of, okay, actually we could make this happen, we could make this a reality. So really want to thank you for that. And as you said, you did a really good job coming in and bringing together all of your different skills. You even said, "Oh, I speak a little bit of Spanish." By the end of it, you would like, I never heard you say, "Sorry, I don't understand." You kind of seem to pick it up really well and everything. So that's great. I want to wish you really well with the next steps of your studies and your careers and everything like that. Thank you for choosing to stay with us. And hats off to you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you'd like to find out more information, you can go to our website, www.elterrenoecuador.com. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, hasta pronto.